Hey there, everybody. It is me, Alex. Hero. And recently I was tagged by fellow Brilliant, the Gaming Beast, Mr. Sean there. And yeah, I was forwarded 15 different questions, followed by a bonus 16th question of tagging somebody else. And they're all RPG related, so I will help go through them. The originator of these questions was a guy named Heath. He goes by Batman something something something. A fellow nerdian. Yeah. Um, I just forgot it. His channel stuff. Okay, here we go. Question 1. What do you call player agency? Now, in order to help understand the buzzwords of today's youth, I tried to look up the words themselves, then followed by the terminology used to understand exactly what they're getting at. Because there are some words, like at least in the electrician field when I was studying that, where they had specific meanings for the words that they were using, but majority of the time it was very literal. Like the hot, the lead, as it's supposed to be called the lead. It's supposed to lead the electrons through, so it's the positive end, and then the return is the negative because it's coming back. So those were words that had specific meanings in that field, but at least the original words actually meant what they were getting at. And to help understand the long-winded part about why I'm making that analogy is player agency doesn't mean a whole lot. Agency by itself just means to drive. So what do I call player driving? What do I call player leading? It's a very literal statement and has a very literal answer. A player agency is their ability to drive and to lead. So we're talking about the game, so player agency is their ability to lead or to drive the game based on their whim. So with that, that's player agency. To expand on it, the majority of games as a whole, at least I feel, should be based on player agency. But it also can lead to very wacky situations that some GMs may not like. But that's the risk you get when you're a referee. Number 2, what does railroading mean to you if you do apply it? If not, can you say why? Now, for this question, that one was interesting. What does it mean to you if you do apply it? Do you mean and if you do apply it? But that's me breaking down the sentence structure of those questions so far. Anyways, railroading is a type of rail that is on a road. And the act of ing means it's something that is you are in the process of doing, as in I do, ing. So railroading, it's the, by that intention, is just a GM has a specific plan that they want the players to follow through, and it's their way of enforcing that is to make sure people know through subtle words, not through literal, guys, you need to go over here because I told you based on how I wrote this all down that you need to go here to here to here. It's usually done through what's the right way to say it? It's cloak and dagger. Shoot. Anyways, it has to do through subtle means of trying to lead them into a specific format. Now that can be useful because some games actually demand that there be a focal point that the players are trying to achieve, a goal. It isn't a random, well, let's see what these players want to have done today. Nothing like that at all. It's this session we are going to the Queen of Agrabah and we're going to destroy a great evil. And that's the goal of the game design itself, and that's what the session is going to be about. So railroading as a whole, there's a lot of games that focus on railroading, especially if you actually play the game by the rules that's written down. And railroading is about perspective. Railroading focuses on the GM when there are many players who have specific agendas that they want to get accomplished that involves them forcing their narrative through a rail delivery system along a road. So if they wanted to say get rich, if that's their end game goal, and they are doing as much as they can to get that money, then they're railroading the story for their own need, with disregard to the other players. But yeah, that's what I mean. It's a matter of perspective, and the majority of the time it's still really dumb, but that's what it is. It's just, is the GM railroading or are the players railroading? That's the real factor. It's a give and take on those two situations, those two entities. But yes, I have railroad, but I've only railroad with permission from the players, and that's it. Because I'd rather the players be in charge of what they want to do in the game session, and the fun for me is interacting with those personality types and the ways that they choose to solve things. 3. How does it feel like for you when you've had a bad session? When I have a bad session, I generally don't want to have another session again with that group of people. That's pretty much, that's the feeling that I want to have, and I take time and reflect to see which moments were potentially my fault for either not enforcing a rule, or not trying to mediate a conflict between the players that are obsessed over a specific problem in the game, such as sharing of loot, and have it escalate quickly to where there's a fight via PvP, the player versus player contact sport, things like that. And then I determine, through evaluation, if I could do anything to fix that later on, or if this is going to be a recurring problem, recurring bit of dealing with this type of issue. And then I go from there to determine whether or not I keep playing, keep being the referee, things like that. But yeah, generally, when I had a bad session, I feel bad. How do you handle bad players? What are some ways you would describe behavior of a bad player in your view? Well, the way I handle bad players is I don't handle them at all. Just like I don't really handle good players. I see what their reaction is and I deal with it. And bad players are people who need to focus on talking out of character to ask for permission on things because they're not fully aware of what the rules are or what the setting is or what they are even capable of doing in the game, which is a mixture of not knowing the rules. That's something that kind of annoys me. It's not a game breaker. It's just, it shows a lack of interest in caring of what they're trying to do with their character. Another one would be to just blatantly steal another creative idea from either like a TV show or a book they read, because it feels more like a power fantasy of like, oh, let's see if I can repeat the same story that I enjoy so much in another medium, but this time I get to feel that level of like, oh, awesomeness. Um, there are many different ways I can describe a bad player. Um, there's for another type of to be a bad player is someone who forces their own ideals onto the other characters without at least making it a pliable issue for story, such as being a zealot for their own religious views and then imposing it in game and trying to kill the bad guys when the the fellow players are doing bad things themselves, and so they're going to end up trying to kill the other players just for the sake of it, based on their viewpoint of what determines what's good or bad. It gets annoying. That's all. Yeah, I've spent too much time just. What's the best way to describe any more of that? Yeah, but pretty much that's it. Trying to reference the book as often as possible, not knowing what to do with their character, um, and having an agenda that's outside of what their character's written like thought process, goals, feelings. Having a player agenda that's outside of that. That those are things that usually annoy me. Like it's very frustrating having to deal with on a recurring basis. Oh yeah, also cheaters, people who fudge their dice because it negates the game portion of the story, and yeah, that's the general negatives. What's a good player in your opinion? What are some things? What are some of the things good players do? Uh, a good player, also known in the good book, is ones that are close to God. But of course, I'm taking the literal translation about that for laughs. Anyways, a good player is someone who does not have to ask a bunch of things out of character. As I mentioned, it's the exact opposite. I mean, that's that's pretty much what it is. Uh, it's someone who, if they choose to have a voice, they maintain that accent while they are in character, and they do their best to adhere to the guidelines that they set for their own character, to stay true to themselves based on what they agreed upon with their character sheet. And also to not have a character whose main goal is to sabotage the other players. Like having a character whose goal is to kill a fellow party member. To me, that's pointless. The entire goal of pleasure from playing that character is the betrayal, and watching the other player not react kindly to that sort of maneuver. And to me, it feels selfish. That's about it. Macabre stuff, things that are very dark. I generally like, okay, what's the point? Number 6, how do you handle splitting up a group if you do? If not, can you say why? Alright, so I do not mind splitting up groups at all, and the way that I do it is that I set up a tracker for time purposes. Group A, Group B, And after a few actions from one group, then I switch to the next, and I try to maintain on paper for notes what they're doing concurrently through that time. And that's about it. I mean, it's just bookkeeping, splitting up a group, and is to go back and forth so that way people aren't just sitting there for an hour and a half waiting for their turn. When Group A gets done with their when they get done with their mini session, and then finally it's Group B's turn. It allows for more engagement that way. Number 7, what do you prefer more? Interaction / roleplay, combat, puzzle and traps, or a mix of all three? Now, the thing that annoyed me about this question is that interaction means all three categories. But then, that's just me being obsessed with words. Because in order to interact with something, you have to touch it, you have to engage with it. Me, I interact with my MP3 player. Yeah. It's a SanDisk, a Sansa clip. Product placement. So, that minor a grudge aside, I definitely prefer roleplay and combat. And roleplay above more things. And that's just not a catch-all. It's to reflect that I care more about how the characters think and how the player evaluates what the character is thinking and how they portray that sort of thing. Reason B is because there could be a character that is a deaf mute, or a character like something that I've played before who is so dumb that they have difficulty speaking, which is what most people who role play, it's theater of the mind. All you can do is speak, and then every now and then the action of whacking on something to represent being angry. So those types of handicaps are very interesting to me to see how they are again portrayed, how they are used in a role-playing session. And that's about it. Because combat by itself, if I'm just having to move 5 feet, check for traps, move 5 feet, check for traps, the standard old not productive way of officiating a role-playing game, that's very boring, and it's bean counting, something that's slow and repetitive, redundant often, where it's checking to fail, and there are many other board games, card games, video games that speed up that process a lot faster than having to deal with that noise. I generally dislike puzzles and traps because most of the time they're very poorly done, and they are zero-sum games where you either succeed and nothing bad happens to you, or you fail and something bad happens to you, either injury or prevention of moving forward. And also, the majority of the time that I've experienced puzzles / traps is they are placed in the most inconvenient ways that would never really happen in real life. It's part of a trope for those for that section of role-playing games, where it's there because some Grand Master Wizard, who's not a KKK member, but a Grand Master Wizard has decided to set up a building and purposely put traps and puzzles so that way people would run a gauntlet of sorts, a series of challenges. It's a gimmick. It's something that people have to believe, otherwise they would question, how did all this get here? Why are we bothering doing this? This is ridiculous. like that. So mainly roleplay, a little bit of combat, especially if it's a natural progression to combat. That's when I appreciate the most. Number 8, do you tinker with the rule set you use or use it as it is written? And explain why. I prefer to use the rule set as written, and the reason why is that was the game design's choice, and it's usually best to follow what the book tried to do before ever trying to bother messing with it. And the reason being is is the majority of the time when people make house rules, they don't fully know what they're doing and why they are choosing to do it. And if they bother to do 100% read as written, they are more likely to understand and appreciate why it was being done that way. Like for example, healing surges for 5th edition. It's a modern topic because it's a more modern game. Healing surges came from 4th edition, and the goal of it was to prevent people from losing too much health, so that way they are more inclined to stay in the fight longer. And because healing surges were added, the damage potential, the life expectancy of the monsters increased to balance people using their healing surges. So if people remove them willy-nilly without actually thinking about the offensive capabilities of their own opponents, the monsters, you'll have a lot more players with dead characters, and dead characters don't mean engaging or thrilling story. It just means characters are going to be smart and not fight. Or they're going to use such overwhelming odds that they don't have to worry about getting hurt whatsoever. So it changes the foundation of how play works, which is characters being heroic, characters choosing to use thunder rods throughout the majority of their game because they don't want to get killed themselves as easily. So, overwhelming force, that's what I'm referencing. They would use that instead. So it's kind of lame because it refers to being out of character more often than not to describe what's being done instead of being able to actually engage and describe through the engagement what's being done. The whole sit around the table for 10 minutes talking about what you're going to do for that next round, that sort of thing. Do you mind running NPCs with a group of player characters? Yes, I do mind, because I think about it. I have played as NPCs before, as active ones, where the player characters would instruct. Usually, I would be the hired mercenary and role play their actions, and then I would roll to see how those NPCs perform their duties. Because I do not want to have anybody take for granted what they could be doing, since that would involve enforcing a specific thought process, a specific agenda of railroading. Yeah, something like that. So I do play as NPCs from time to time based on what people need. Such as if there's only 2 player characters, I won't mind having an NPC for them to buddy around with and pretty much play it like an actual character. Yeah. Thoughts on campaigns and one-shots? Do you prefer, this is number 10, but one more than the other or fine with either? I'm fine with either. There's really no difference. Well, the difference being with a one-shot, there is no continuing thought of a character's story arc, of their personality. Meanwhile, thoughts on campaigns, a lot of the times these characters, these game sessions, they take way too long to finish because for some reason people assume, based on the type of, it's based on where the term came from, because a campaign it's in reference to a war campaign. And a war campaign was based on the season. So every 3 months was your campaign. It didn't usually last longer than that. Usually it was shorter, between 3 months or shorter. So any campaign that lasts longer than 3 months is no longer a campaign at that point. It's like a dynasty. Um, but but that to me is when it gets a bit too much, because oftentimes it's just an example. It's either an example of the players not following the arc of a campaign, because a campaign to me is there's a start point and then there's an end point, and the players know what the end point is, and their goal is getting to that end point, but not open shut case get there. It's them, the process of them getting to that end point. That's the campaign. And a one shot is exactly that. It's one session. So it's them starting, seeing the goal point, and immediately finishing to that goal point, usually within the arc of 2 to 4 hours. So that's pretty much it. I have problems with both of them, but usually campaigns are way too long, and one shots there's not enough really depth to explore the personality of characters, and those are my issues really. But that's just how people use them, not whether or not they're bad or good. I'm fine with doing either or. Number 11, how much fantasy versus realism do you apply in most of your games? I apply a lot of realism. Surrealism, as they call it. And the reason being is oftentimes the tropes of fantasy, there's a lot of give and take, a lot of assumptions made on what characters will do and what will be skipped for convenience sake, because like, oh no, why are we going to have this interaction over buying potatoes? And to me, it's the interaction of talking to the NPCs, of haggling. That to me is really important, and that's part of realism. Is not going through the motions of things that are to be taken for granted of, and I like that quite a bit. So yeah, I definitely prefer a lot of realism in a game, and exploring how that realism will be different than making the assumptions of the fantasy, of things that will just be assumed as like, oh, yeah, of course you climb the mountain with no issues. And the realism would be like actually making attempts to do either dive rolls through challenges, having to analyze the mountainside, and the GM will provide information doing that, and then trying to figure out what would be the best way to get up there in a safe manner or in a timely manner. Right, that speed is the issue. You need to get up there fast, or you can take your time. That to me is very quite fascinating, and that's what I prefer. 12. Do you prefer running modules, modifying modules, or running your own story? He put hack, but that's a very hacky statement. Apocalypse World stuff. Anyone who has a prepared story is running a module. That's just from my own point of view. It's just that it's a personal module that isn't published yet. So yeah, I run modules where I have a few things in mind of what's going to go on, and I react to the players and introduce the conflict from my own story based on what the players are going to be doing. And I assumed, of course, that Heath is trying to me by running modules. Do I buy a book that is a prepared story and play off that module? The answer is I've done that before, and it's definitely not bad to do, because it also helps to set expectations, where the goal is to deal with this scenario and not really try to derail it so much. Because if someone knows that this is a module, they at least know that to try and not be that one guy, that bad player who purposely derails it because a module is based on the definitions of railroading. That's what its goal is to have an endpoint, and for players to try and get to that endpoint. But yeah, so running modules or running my own story, I don't really like to modify them so much, because I also don't really need to modify them. Oftentimes when people refer to hacking modules, they are talking about taking out NPCs that are not important, plot development in the story, and oftentimes I don't really remove or change those things that happen in the book. I just don't even really highlight it if it's something that the players don't really either need to know or care about. One example would be in a Warhammer fantasy role-playing game, 3rd edition. I ran the module that comes with the starter set. And in the starter set, there was a lot of detailed information about the garden, the wolves, the dogs that the gardener is in charge of, because he's in charge of the kennel as well. Specific NPC names, things like that. I didn't bother including it. But if the player wanted to know about those things, say like, oh, what's out here in the field? Then I'll go to the book and then I'll give them that answer. Since we are writing a module, I'm going to refer back to the module whenever there's something that I don't know. And I think those are the key differences. I just won't mention them unless the players want it to be mentioned. What gaming system has gotten you the best results? Talk about it. In general, it's the greatest system ever designed, period. I have a review on my on my channel here talking about the goods and bads of it, but yeah, it's a game that requires there to be a goal. It's a goal-oriented game where the players determine what the goal is. So it already sets up a railroad, and then followed by every single bit of the questionnaire that the character sees it's about defining the personality of the character to make it easier to role play that character, to focus the thought pattern that the player is going to try and force with that character. And because the system and the mechanics of trying to engage in die rolls, there's almost no way to really game the system to maximize your potential, because it's out of 10. It's a D10 system, 10's the best number, and there are many characters who can reach the number 10 on the die pool system. So the players, once they understand this, they don't focus on thinking about which way can I try and maximize my potential of succeeding. They just think about what's cool that's available via their sheet to get that across. And I played 4 games of it, and each time has been quite good, very, very enjoyable, by the legendary Steve Mathers. Legendary in my mind, at least. What method has gotten you the best results? Talk about it. Now, methods. Can't really tell you by what methods, because it's not really a method is a type of procedure. It's an operation. So it refers to a specific subject. Just to say method, I don't get. Like, what method as a GM? Because as a GM, to me the best method is to not punish the players so often for the decisions they make, and just to ask them what they are currently doing at all. Not like what productive thing are you doing to enhance your character. I don't care about that at all. Just like, oh, what are you doing right now? Where are you located in the city? How long have you been there? You know, questions to ask to help them engage in the thought process of their character. Yeah, I don't really know what to say for number 14 because there's not a specific subject in mind, so there's no real answer to give. Number 15, what got you into running these kind of games? Okay, what got me into running in these kind of games? Playing video games, role-playing games on the video graphics, the accelerated video graphics. I really enjoyed being able to interact with NPCs and learn the story. I also had really cool RPGs to play that made it easier to get into that sort of behavior. And also because it's not supposed to be a staged event where everything's pre-planned. I find it very interesting, and part of the appeal is not knowing what either how the player is going to interact or how the GM is going to interact with the players. The mystery of chaos is one of the things that of uncertainty is what really drives me to want to play these type of role-playing games, at least the tabletop versions. Who am I tagging? Honestly, no one. Maybe Critical Failure, just because I would like to hear his noise about role-playing games, since he wanted to do a role-playing game channel, but he just mainly got focused on video games itself, at least with his audience. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, freaking Death Adder 83. Just to hear again what because he seems to be he's a guy who does mainly Let's Play videos and also silly videos as a whole, like showing videos of his cat being a weirdo. And to me, he definitely be a guy that I would want to I would want to hear what crazy nonsense compiles of a role-playing game to him. So yeah, right now, Least Critical Failure and Death Adder 83. I would ask Burger Writer as well, but I don't know if he would even bother doing a video response. Let's see, outside of that, yeah, no one else really. So, oh, what am I saying? Freaking Heather. Because it's been like almost a year and a half since she's done a video. Sakura Celeste is her channel name, and I really wanted to see her do something. So this would be cool to do, to get her responses on this. So, yeah, draw this to a close. Thank you, Sean, for conscripting me into answering these questions, as well as Heath for getting the ball rolling on inspiring this. And have a good day.